January 16, 1920, Chicago, Illinois. It's a Saturday night, and as midnight draws near, bar patrons take their last sips of legal alcohol. When the calendar flips, America is officially going dry.
The Volstead Act, the dreaded 18th Amendment, which has been brewing since the Industrial Revolution hit the United States, and suddenly everybody's working a 40-hour work week, and alcohol is being blamed for absenteeism, tardiness. It's also, more importantly, being blamed for violence that men rain down on women.
There's no better way to create demand than to tell someone they can't have something. And essentially what the government did is they immediately created a demand for alcohol that could not be satisfied any other way than through illegal means. And that was what the mob was built for. They were able to slip in and immediately start putting together networks of buying and selling alcohol and providing it to people.
In this Prohibition era, Chicago finds itself as a real hub. It's a big city, it's centrally located for distribution purposes. There's already a kind of notoriously corrupt law enforcement system, and so all of this is kind of the perfect storm for it to be the place that Al Capone makes his name.
Al Capone becomes the most important mob boss and the most important bootlegger in Chicago. He's actually Brooklyn-born. He moves to Chicago around 1920, and he takes what is already a pretty well-run gang, and he turns it into a $1 million money-making powerhouse.
By some accounts, Al Capone's operation brings in $100 million a year, about $1.7 billion in today's money.
There were actually two rival gangs at this time that were really vying for everyone's attention. There was the Chicago outfit run by Al Capone and the North Side crew, which was run by George Bugs Moran. Bugs Moran earned the nickname Bugs because he was very violent, he was very volatile, and they kind of thought he wasn't all there. He was just kind of buggy.
While Capone rules Chicago's South Side, Moran maintains a stronghold on the North Side. And by 1926, their rivalry turns into an all-out war.
Bugs Moran and Al Capone couldn't stand that one might be growing faster than the other. And before long, we see Al Capone looking over his shoulder. In fact, he has a $50,000 bounty on his head that's bringing people from out of state in trying to kill Al Capone. So with this bounty on his head, Al Capone had an entourage of people who would travel with him, whose sole responsibility was to look out for something that would place him in danger. And that day came in a little restaurant in Cicero, near Southside Chicago. And Capone's eating when all of a sudden a bunch of cars pull up. The windows come down, and men with Thompson submachine guns start spraying the building with bullets. More than 1,000 bullets were fired at Capone that day. And miraculously, this guy is able to escape unharmed.
It's important to realize that even though these two men loomed so large, this was an era where petty criminality was everywhere. Everybody in Chicago seemed to be on the take at this time.
The city's police force was notoriously corrupt. Even Chicago Mayor William Hale Thompson was rumored to be in Al Capone's pocket.
The public is kind of willing to turn a blind eye to some of this stuff. A lot of people felt that, you know, these guys can kill each other off. We don't really care. Just keep our booze flowing and keep us out of the crossfire.
All that changes on the morning of February 14, 1929, Valentine's Day.
There is a meeting in a garage on the north side, and there's 7 members of the gang that are waiting for their boss, George Bugs Moran, to meet them. According to eyewitnesses in the neighborhood, they see a Cadillac pull up, and 4 or 5 men jump out of this Cadillac, 2 dressed in police uniforms, and they knock on the door of the garage. it's very likely that the 7 men assembled in the garage thought that this was just a simple police shakedown.
This was something that gangs were used to at that time. And frankly, if it's true that they owned the police through bribes and other kinds of things, it wasn't too stressful to go through the process, get arrested, and get bailed out and the charges to be dropped. But this time it was much different.
So they are told, get against the wall, put your hands up. The ones who had weapons have their weapons relieved of them. The men from the Cadillac unsheath their overcoats, pull out Thompson submachine guns and shotguns, and then they open fire.
There's 70 shots fired. According to eyewitnesses, the perpetrators get back into the Cadillac and they speed off. People in the neighborhood know something has gone on. They've heard these shots. So a few brave souls go into the garage and discover what is clearly a horrific crime scene.
Newspapers across the country pick up the story, dubbing it the Valentine's Day Massacre.
They published incredibly gruesome images of this violence. And if you can imagine, before this, people knew about the crime and the violence of the underworld, but it was very much sort of below the radar of what most people had in their face. Then all of a sudden, you have this brutal act of violence and pictures of it in the newspaper.
The usual suspects are rounded up, but no arrests were ever made that stuck. Even though we're approaching a century since the Valentine's Day Massacre, it is still one of the coldest cases, one of the most intriguing mysteries when it comes to crime in American history.
There's this immediate public outcry for justice. People want to know who did this and to see them brought in, but no one can really figure it out. The rivalry between Bugs Moran and Al Capone is legendary. So when a group of Moran's men gets gunned down so violently, minds immediately go to one name.
The person with the most to gain when it comes to the death of Moran and the gutting of his gang is obviously Al Capone. Many people are certain that it's him because he is rumored to have already initiated, if you will, the deaths of maybe 200 people in Chicago, including a handful of men who have been Bugs Moran's predecessors.
Bugs Moran is truly the only man standing in Al Capone's way of taking full control of Chicago. Even though Bugs Moran wasn't in the garage during the morning of the massacre, it completely hobbles Moran's operation.
Moran himself publicly accuses Capone of orchestrating the massacre.
As one would expect, Bugs Moran blames Al Capone and says words to the effect of, "Only Capone kills like that." Many politicians and many people of note around the United States already believe that Al Capone is capable of doing anything, and so they tend to drift over into siding with Bugs Moran's interpretation of the events.
Herbert Hoover had just been elected president. In his campaign, he spoke about bringing law and order back to the United States. And there was a focus on Capone. It was determined that he was a public enemy.
In true Capone fashion, the notorious mob boss seems to have the perfect alibi.
On the morning of the massacre, Capone is in Florida. He's living in his home on Palm Island in Miami, and that morning he has a meeting with the DA to talk about his involvement with another murder, something that had happened the year before. It's impossible to put Capone at the scene of the massacre if he's clearly talking to law enforcement agents in Miami. Just because his alibi eliminates him from pulling the trigger, it doesn't eliminate his involvement. It's very possible he still pulled the strings.
Some people believe the fact that Al Capone had such an airtight alibi, that this was part of the setup and probably means more so that he ordered the hit at a time when he knew he would not be there.
So typically, part of the Capone plan was for there to be nothing that could tie him to the event, no matter how many layers he needed to use. Even if he had shot someone or beaten somebody's head in, he was never there.